Hello everyone, welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfic. Today I'll be continuing with If We're Being Honest. This will be Part 3, Chapter 3, entitled Bakugo, Part 1. So it turned out that it was possible to not answer direct questions. It took a lot of willpower, like when you've worked out well past your limit and you've had to mentally push yourself to do one more set. It was pretty much impossible, though, when you weren't expecting the question, which Izuku realized during breakfast. It was a nice affair to begin with. Nobody was treating him like he was made of glass, which he greatly appreciated. Everyone was being a bit nicer to him than normal, though, but he didn't really mind. It was different, much different than most people were when they found out he was quirkless. Different, but nice. That is, until Shinso slammed his hands on the table in front of him. "I love and appreciate you." The idle chatter at the table stopped. Izuku stared at him, since his aggressive tone didn't match his words at all. "What?" He huffed. "My insomnia kept me up as usual, and mixed with how worried I was about you, I barely got any sleep." "Sorry." "No, not your fault," he groaned, rubbing his face with his hands. "That's too much information. I was worried, but I was also thinking about how much I appreciate you as a friend, and that I'm glad I got to know you. I was also angry all at night at the people who hurt you, but that's less important." Izuku felt something warm fill his chest. "Thank you. I don't think you understand how much I appreciate you saying that." "You're welcome," he said, his face a bit red, obviously slightly embarrassed by everything he had just said, before adding almost as an afterthought, "So who did bully you?" Izuku opened his mouth on his own. "Tsubasa Ito, Nico Tashahashi, Bakugo Katsuki." He slammed a hand over his mouth, but he was a second too late. The damage had been done. "Yeah, questions asked that would catch you off guard. Those were impossible." Everyone stared at him, and he got a strange sense of déjà vu from the day before. Their eyes slowly turned to the blonde sitting at the other table, who was glaring at the food in front of him like it had killed his family. Izuku felt Shoto stand up next to him, and he felt a rush of panic in his chest. Bakugo." His voice was as cold as ice. "Do I need to punch you?" Katsuki stood up abruptly and started to march around the table. "Let's go half and half, you and me, right now." "I'll enjoy wiping that smirk off your face." "I'd like to see you fucking try." "Stop!" Izuku yelled, jumping up and physically putting himself between the two. "This isn't going to do anything but get you guys in trouble." "Shouldn't he be in trouble, though?" Uraraka said, and she sounded pissed. "I think bullying is grounds for expulsion here." Katsuki rounded on her, too. "You want to do over the sports festival, gravity bitch." "I have a name, and so does Midoriya." "Wait, she didn't call him—" "Maybe if you had a heart, you would realize that." "Uraraka, you can still call me Deku," he said, unsure of how to stop the building tension. "It's my hero name." "Guys, calm down," Kirishima said slowly. "We don't know the full story here." Izuku breathed out a sigh of relief. "Thank you, finally." "So what is the full story?" Shoto asked, still looking just as angry as he had during the sports festival. "He was a bully most of our childhood, mostly verbal, but a little physical at times." He flinched at his own words. "Wait, that sounded bad." "It's because it is bad." Ida had joined in now, clearly over his apparent shock. "Midori, you have to realize that it's not okay." "I know it wasn't okay. Of course it wasn't, but it's not like anybody ever told him to stop. The teachers and kids all practically worshipped him. He didn't know any better." "That may be the case for when he was younger, but it shouldn't have been an issue past elementary school," Yamomo said with a glare. "A moral compass would have kicked in by then." "I'll fight you too, Ponytail." "Kachan, you're not helping." "Maybe I don't want to help myself, Deku." And yeah, they all forgot about the truth quirk right there. Izuku would remember his words later and realize and mentally kick himself 100 times over. "Good, because we don't want to help you either. I can't believe we ever thought you were just old rivals." Uraraka seemed to be out for blood at this point, getting right up in his face. "Why would you ever hurt someone like Deku?" Oh good, she was still calling him Deku again. One problem down, a million more to go. Katsuki clicked his tongue. Lots of reasons. Maybe he was just that annoying. The slap rang around the room. Uraraka was breathing hard. "Don't talk about him like that." She spat before walking back over to Izuku and Shoto. Izuku just gaped at her. "What part of fighting will only get us in trouble did you not understand?" It was way more aggressive than he normally would be. But then again, they all were. Uraraka just gave it right back to him. "Are you seriously judging me right now? Why are you defending him? How bad did it even get? What was the worst he ever did?" And yeah, she definitely wouldn't have asked that if she had been in her right mind, truth quirk or not, but she wasn't. "Physically, breaking my arm. Verbally, telling me to jump off of a roof." The shock was almost tangible in the air. No one moved for a long time. Or maybe it just felt like a long time. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't report this to Aizawa. Ida was physically shaking. Whether it was from anger or distress, Izuku didn't know. His mouth almost didn't want to work, but the quirk was actually a blessing for once. He's changed. He isn't like that anymore. And I've forgiven him already. Did he ever actually apologize? Shoto said quietly. Or are you just that kind? Izuku's mouth felt dry. No, he didn't, but this kind of behavior shouldn't be forgiven without an apology, Ida said, almost looking disappointed in his friend. But stop defending him, Shoto yelled, before regretting it immediately. And it filled his face as he realized he just yelled at Izuku. I'm sorry, I just don't think this is okay. Izuku huffed. I'm feeling that from a lot of people. It's honestly kind of weird. Our teachers never cared. Wait, the school didn't even do anything? Uraraka asked incredulously. Izuku really didn't want to stir up the storm waiting in his friend's eyes, but he had no control over the words that left his mouth. Not really. The only time they really did anything was when he broke my arm, and even then, they just called his mom. He looked up, face red, to see everyone staring at him in what couldn't be anything other than shock. The worst seemed to be Kirishima, who shifted to look at his boyfriend with wide eyes. Is all this true, Katsuki? He whispered. Izuku felt his heart break a little, because even though Kirishima knew full well that every single word that came from their mouths was the truth, he still didn't want to believe it. Izuku didn't want to believe it, if he was being honest. It really was horrible. Katsuki shifted. He had been staring at the ground ever since Uraraka had slapped him. Of course it is, you idiot, but when I broke his arm, I was suspended for 3 days. Oh, he hadn't known that, since he had been out of school due to his arm. They were tight on money and couldn't get a doctor for a while. And Deku, they called my mom more often than that. Kirishima flinched back at the harsh tone coming from the blonde, but still found his voice to ask, Why? I didn't mean to break his arm, and it's none of your business, or any of you for that matter. Kirishima really flinched at that. He soon backed off from the blonde altogether before looking down and grabbing his bag from his seat. I'm going to class, he muttered, and then he left, head still down. Katsuki was definitely biting his lip, which meant he definitely wanted to say something, but of course he wasn't going to, because he was Bakugo Katsuki, and Bakugo Katsuki was the most stubborn person on the planet, stubborn enough to fight a literal truth quirk and win. Soon enough, everyone was leaving, until it was just Izuku, Shoto, and Katsuki, who still hadn't moved. Are you coming? Shoto asked, looking between the two. Yeah, but can I have a minute alone with Kachan? Shoto sighed like he knew this was coming. Fine. This doesn't mean I'm happy with your decision. Ouch. Once they were alone, Katsuki finally stopped biting his lip. Don't you dare apologize, nerd. It was going to come out. You can't keep everything under wraps. Izuku rolled his eyes. We should start walking now, or we're going to be late. Katsuki moved to grab his things, but he didn't say anything else until he walked out the door. Izuku huffed in exasperation before rushing to follow him. If you want them to forgive you, you're going to have to actually talk to them. You can't force me to talk, and this dumb quirk can't either. That doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to them. Izuku got in front of him and started walking backwards, but of course Katsuki was avoiding his gaze. Don't you want Kirishima to understand? He exhaled, almost in a way that could have been a laugh. You say that like you understand. Izuku rolled his eyes again. I understand more than you think. Associating with me would make you look weak, and you hate being weak. He almost laughed again. It was a moment before he spoke, though. And what makes you think the others will believe you? And don't say anything about this stupid quirk. You can say things that you think are true but are completely false, like when Kaminari said that the bushes in the front lawn were poisonous. That is true, Izuku said with a snort, and they'll believe me because you're going to back me up. What did I say just now about thinking things are true? Ha ha. But seriously, if we both tell them the same story, they'll believe us. I'll tell them about how I wouldn't leave you alone, and you just had way too much pent-up aggression for a 5-year-old. I was almost a stalker, for crying out loud. A stalker? He asked, looking like he was about to start laughing hysterically. Literally everyone followed me around. We were fucking children. Did everyone else take notes on your quirk, though? You were just trying to practice your analysis. It's not like you felt like training physically would help you at all, since everyone told you how weak you always would be. I guess, but I could have at least picked up some weights, Izuku said quietly. Sometimes I wonder if I was even serious about being a hero back then. Of course you were serious, Katsuki yelled, surprising him. You were just using that big brain of yours instead of your weak little body, even if I never realized it. You even told me that the reason that you could help me from that stupid sludge villain was for that. And don't act like you didn't drop everything to train your ass off with All Might. You literally are the opposite of lazy. So you didn't mind my notes on you? He genuinely asked, because for some reason that stuck on him the most. He had been the one to destroy his notebook after all. I mean, it was a little weird, but you've always been weird, and you love quirks. That, and you really admired me. I admire you too now. I'm glad we're friends again. Katsuki said these words almost absent-mindedly, then turned bright red. Izuku definitely wasn't close to tears. Nope. He did his best to lighten the mood, knowing his friend was now majorly uncomfortable, even if he was telling the truth. The blonde never really did the whole emotions thing. It's a good thing I ate that strand of hair then, isn't it? Katsuki let out a bark of laughter. Whatever you say, Deku. And then, I know you already told me, but I just want to know for sure. You never looked down on me, did you? Izuku casually wiped at his eyes. Of course not, Kachan. You were my best friend. Katsuki turned away with suspiciously wet eyes. Thanks, nerd. They arrived to homeroom just in time, and they noticed how everyone stiffened when they walked in together. Aizawa most definitely noticed, but didn't say anything. And for that simple fact, Izuku was grateful. They really didn't need a mass confrontation right now. All right, class, for today's hero training, you'll be working in pairs. You pick, I don't care. All Might is waiting for you at ground beta. Pick your partners before you arrive. Good luck, he said before promptly falling asleep. As everyone started pairing off, Izuku noticed one very clear thing. Everyone was avoiding Katsuki, so he turned to him and loudly said with a big smile, Hey, Kachan, want to be partners? A lot of the chatter ceased, and heads whipped around to look at the two of them. Sure, I guess. Izuku grinned even wider. Great. Kirishima, do you want to be my partner? Shoto asked, staring Izuku dead in the eyes. Izuku could feel his heart start to break into a million pieces, but he just kept smiling, and maybe bit his tongue to keep from speaking, too. Sure, man, the redhead said, far less enthusiastic than normal. He looked over at Katsuki, who just turned his head away. Something hardened in Kirishima's eyes, and it had nothing to do with his quirk. Let's win this. Izuku saw Katsuki stand up next to him before getting right into his line of sight, looking him square in the face. I'm only going to say this once, nerd. We're winning this thing, or I'm going to metaphorically blast your face off. Even with them added metaphorically, several people gasped at Katsuki's sudden words of aggression and looked very worried for Izuku's safety, like he was still a fragile, quirkless middle schooler. Izuku just smirked and stood up, eager to prove them wrong. I'm counting on it. They ended up winning the exercise, no surprise there. Everyone grudgingly congratulated them, meaning they very clearly stated that they were still very upset after their words of good sportsmanship. Fuck all of you except Deku and Shitty Hair, Katsuki had said before heading back to the dorms alone. Izuku sighed for what had been the 100th time that day before walking over to his friends. He seems ticked. He also doesn't want to defend himself to you guys. Uraraka turned and started away. I don't care if he defends himself or not. I'm not forgiving him. And with that, she was gone. Izuku looked back at Ida and Shoto. Are you guys going to leave me too? And maybe this quirk was making him way blunter than normal, but he couldn't bring himself to care. Shoto blanched. No, we're not. I'm not mad. It's not you I'm mad at, even if I am a bit upset with your choices. Izuku opened his mouth to tell him that he could make his own decisions. Shoto meant well, but he didn't understand. Wait. Izuku's eyes widened as he realized something. He had to bite his tongue from blurting it out right then and there. It should have been obvious right from the start. He turned to Ida and spoke carefully. I'm going to go ahead and head back with Shoto. We need to talk. Shoto looked at him, almost in fear at the dreaded traditional breakup words. Izuku could hardly blame him for seeming afraid, after all. He probably had a very angry expression on his face. Ida simply nodded, and soon they were on their way to the dorms, away from anyone who could potentially eavesdrop. Izuku broke the silence. He's not Endeavor. Shoto's head snapped up. What? Kachan, he's not Endeavor. Shoto scowled and looked at the ground. Izuku had hit the nail right on the head. You know, I can't deny that I've been thinking about it. They were both power-hungry people that held too much power over us. Why are you defending either of them? Izuku shook his head. I'm definitely not defending Endeavor. He was a grown adult that made the decision to abuse his family. Kachan was a child raised to believe that he was better than everyone else in a society where I was expendable. Shoto winced at his words. You're not expendable. I was treated that way, though, he said as he kicked a rock, and everyone else believed it. So for a kid with a powerful quirk to be seen as weak, for even associating with me, it was really clear what path he was going to take. That doesn't make him right. Of course it doesn't, he practically shouted. But it's different. Kachan realized his mistakes, and he's actively trying to be better, and never hurt you and your family for practically decades without a hint of remorse. Shoto glanced at him, not saying anything for a moment. Izuku was afraid that he had gone too far when he felt a hand wrap around his own. "You're right," he said quietly. "I know you're right. I'm sorry, but I'm still upset with him." "It's okay," Izuku said, relief flooding his veins. "I know how hard it is to forgive the people that hurt those you care about, like a certain dumpster fire." Shoto smiled. "I like it when you call him those stupid nicknames, you know. Trash monster, burning sulfur. Did you know that I thought burning trash was illegal, but then I met your sperm donor?" His boyfriend was openly laughing now, and Izuku didn't hesitate to pull him into a side hug as they walked. Shoto kissed the top of his head, and for a moment everything felt right. It was the first official movie night of Class 1A's Truth Quarantine. Everyone's gathered in the common room, talking animatedly about what movies they were going to choose. Well, everyone was there except a certain childhood friend of Izuku's. He couldn't take it anymore, the way they were all just pretending he wasn't there, so he stood up and made his way to the elevator, ignoring the protests from everyone. He knocked on Katsuki's door. When he received no answer, he just knocked louder. "What do you want?" Katsuki grumbled from inside. "You're going to come downstairs and explain this with me," he said matter-of-factly. "And what makes you think I'm going to do that?" "Because I'm asking you to." This is usually when I would say something sarcastic, but I can't now, so I'm just going to say that you're not funny. Izuku huffed before leaning against the door. He closed his eyes and let his mouth run, letting his emotions and the truth quirk overtake him. "I know you're sorry," he said quietly. "I don't need to hear you say the words because I know you hate feeling weak. I know you're trying to be better, too. And yeah, you did some really shitty stuff, but we were kids, okay? We're still kids. I think everyone else forgot about that. We're still learning, and we're going to keep learning." No response. He almost kicked the door in frustration. I know you better than anyone here, Kachan. Even Kirishima. I know you don't want to admit that you were wrong in front of everyone, but you've got to do it eventually, or it's going to eat you alive." "What makes you think all that?" Katsuki asked. His voice sounded slightly choked. "Well, for one, I know you can't stand not having Kirishima around, even if you won't admit it. And the rest of your friends, you care about what they think of you, no matter how much you pretend otherwise." No sound was coming from behind him. Maybe he should try picking the lock. Suddenly he fell back as the door was opened, and he would have fallen right into Katsuki if he hadn't caught himself and pushed him off. "Why were you leaning on my door?" "Honestly, I thought it would take way longer to convince you." His friend snorted. "Of course you did." When the elevator door slid open to the common room, chatter seemed to cease. Izuku realized that everyone seemed to be staring at him a lot lately. "Look," he said as he and his friend left the elevator. "I know you're mad at Kachan, and for good reason. Give us a chance to explain our relationship, okay? It's gotten better, I promise." No one made a move to say anything, and Izuku watched as they all made questioning eye contact with each other. He met Shoto's eyes and saw him give a slight nod and smile. He sighed in relief, glad to have him on their side since he had talked to him earlier. Izuku wondered if his boyfriend had talked to the others while he was upstairs. "Promises are kind of redundant right now," Jiro deadpanned when no one else spoke. "I guess you're right," he said, glad that that was the only protest. "So can we do this?" He waited for them all to nod as he and Katsuki sat down, and he looked down at the ground with a sheepish smile. "I guess we should start at the beginning." And with that, Izuku began to tell the story of two childhood-born friends that were born into a society that valued strength over kindness, about how his classmates had all learned about the quirklessness and immediately turned their backs on him, about how a horrible environment that pushed one boy down while raising the other one up, and how one of the boys thought the other was looking down on him and retaliated. "I know it was wrong of him, but I can't be all that mad at him, can I? He was just like any other kid in our class. Our teachers pretty much encouraged the bullying, from kindergarten up. I was always the instigator for the fights on official reports." "But that's ridiculous," Ida exclaimed. "How could the teachers lie on forms like that?" "We didn't grow up rich classes," Katsuki cut in. "We were in a poor neighborhood. The school was prejudiced and fucking horrible." Everyone seemed surprised to hear Katsuki speak that way about the place that raised them, if only because it backed up what Izuku was saying. "I want to hear you apologize," Uraraka suddenly hissed. "I get it, our society sucks, and you thought that he was looking down on you, but that doesn't excuse the years of abuse you put him through." "I know it doesn't excuse it," Katsuki hissed back. "I'm damn well aware of that. And it's not even like that was the only reason I did it. I have so many excuses I could use, but I'm not going to. I was a shitty person. Can't we leave it at that?" I still think an apology is in order, Shoto muttered. Guys, Izuku said slowly, I don't need to actually hear him say it. It's okay. He hates apologizing, all right? It makes him feel weak. Don't go telling them that, stupid nerd. Well, it does, so I'm not going to let them hold that over your head. I'm interested in the other reasons you bullied him, Yaomomo had said abruptly, crossing her arms. And don't say something like he was annoying, because that is simply unacceptable. I just said that to get you guys off my back earlier. He was pretty annoying, though, and wouldn't leave me alone about my quirk. Hey, what the fuck happened to no asking questions without explicit permission? I came up with that, Kaminari whispered excitedly to himself. But you're right, Izuku said with a sad smile. I really didn't leave you alone about your quirk. I probably should have given you some space. So what other reasons were there? Kirishima said, looking down like he had been all day. I want to understand. Everyone turned to look at Katsuki, interested but obviously apprehensive about what he was going to say. Honestly, Izuku felt the same way. What was he going to say? Katsuki shifted, looking down at the floor uncomfortably. It was a long time before he spoke. Part of the reason was because my quirk makes me have low blood pressure, and my body has to constantly pump me with adrenaline to keep me conscious. I had a lot of anger and nowhere to put it. Izuku blanched back in shock. After all that had happened, that was one of the reasons why Katsuki was so cruel to him? Because he literally had to stay angry to stay conscious? Katsuki looked just as unnerved by this confession as Izuku was, if a bit flustered, as did everyone else. It was like everything that they knew about the fiery boy finally made sense. Of course he was always fired up. If he wasn't, he might collapse or worse. Kachan, I had no idea, he said quietly. Katsuki just huffed out something that was almost a laugh, but wasn't quite there. Yeah, well, I'm surprised with all that note-taking you did on my quirk. Now it's Izuku's turn to be flustered. Yeah, he said with a small laugh. I guess I should have picked up on that. Yeah, Katsuki said somewhat awkwardly, and then, I'm sorry. Izuku nearly fell out of his chair. Kachan? I said sorry, all right? I'm not saying it again. Katsuki looked down suddenly, interested in his shoes. I might as well make the most of this damn truth quirk and say this before I lose my nerve. I never should have treated you like that, and I know my stupid anger isn't an excuse or anything. It was wrong. And before any of you extras say anything, he said with a glare, I absolutely know that Deku is way too forgiving for his own good. He looked back at Izuku. So yeah, I'm sorry. He said it through somewhat gritted teeth, and a scowl was set on his face, and he was glaring daggers at him now, but he meant it. This was 100% real. He was sorry for what he had done to him. And Izuku got the apology he never thought he would get, so... Thank you so much, Izuku said through the lump in his throat. I think you know I've forgiven you. Katsuki clicked his tongue and looked away, but not before rolling his eyes in exasperation. Of course you have, you idiot. This concludes Part 3, Chapter 3. I'll be back with the newest update as soon as possible. Hope you guys are still enjoying this one. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.